My name is Dustyn Taylor, and the topic I'll be exploring with you today is called photosynthesis. So within this topic, we'll be discussing what photosynthesis is, what the steps are within the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis and the light-independent reactions of photosynthesis, and how those two cycles are connected. So before we get started, I have a few questions for you to test your knowledge on the subject. So we'll take them up at the end of the video. And these questions are: what is photosynthesis and why is it important for life on Earth? Which organisms are capable of carrying out photosynthesis? In which part of the plant cell does photosynthesis take place? What are the main raw materials needed for photosynthesis? And what are the main products formed during photosynthesis? All right, so let's get started. So photosynthesis is essentially the process by which green plants, algae, and some bacteria convert sunlight into chemical energy stored in sugars. It then uses this energy to build molecules such as glucose. It's essential for all life on Earth as it forms the base of most food webs, which is basically like who eats who, and it produces the oxygen we breathe. So now this process has an overall equation, and the overall equation commonly written for photosynthesis is this: 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus sunlight equals C6H12O6 plus 6O2. So essentially this jumble of letters and numbers really means it's just carbon dioxide and water and sunlight rearranged by the energy from light into glucose and oxygen gas as the products. So this overall equation leads to a series of complex reactions that occur in two main sets of steps. So these are the light-dependent reactions, sometimes just called the light reactions, and the light-independent reactions, also called the Kelvin-Benson cycle, or just the Kelvin cycle for short. A lot of people just call it that. So the first set of reactions requires light and occurs in the thylakoid membranes of chloroplasts, which are highlighted here. These are flattened membrane sacs stacked into what's called grana. The goal is to convert light energy into chemical energy in the form of ATP and NADPH. So these acronyms, I'm just going to keep them as acronyms because it's just too long to say it out and I won't be able to pronounce it properly and nobody will be able to remember it anyway. So I'm just going to go by acronyms, okay? So ATP is the fundamental energy that powers nearly all cellular activities. And NADPH acts as a key electron and hydrogen donor for powering photosynthesis. All right, so the first step within the light-dependent reactions is called light absorption. So chlorophyll and other pigments absorb solar photons. And for those of you that don't know, chlorophyll is the green pigment in plants, algae, and cyanobacteria that captures light energy for photosynthesis, converting sunlight into chemical energy for food and giving plants their color. So when this chlorophyll absorbs light, its electrons become excited, meaning they gain energy. And this energy starts the rest of the process. So the next part of the process is the splitting of the water, which is called photolysis. So in this reaction, light energy splits water molecules into protons, electrons, and oxygen, which is released as a byproduct. And the splitting of water is the source of the oxygen that's released during photosynthesis, so the oxygen that we breathe. So the next step within the light-dependent reactions is the electron transport chain and proton gradient. So high-energy electrons travel through an electron transport chain, or ETC for short. These are embedded in the thylakoid membrane of the chloroplast. So as electrons move through this chain, Photosystem 1 and Photosystem 2 capture light energy. These photosystems are crucial proteins in plant chloroplasts. The electron's energy is used to pump protons into the interior of the thylakoid compartment, creating a proton gradient. This gradient then drives the synthesis of ATP, which is a process called chemiosmosis. And electrons eventually reduce NADP positive into NADPH, the high energy electron carrier which I mentioned earlier. And ATP and NADPH are not stored long term. They serve as fuel for the next set of reactions called the Kelvin cycle. And the Kelvin cycle is also called the light independent reactions because it doesn't need light at that moment to function. But what it does depend on is the ATP and the NADPH produced by the light reactions. And these reactions occur in the stroma, the fluid-filled region inside chloroplasts surrounding the thylakoids. So the main purpose of the Kelvin cycle is to take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turn it into energy-rich sugar molecules. The Kelvin cycle can be divided into 3 major stages. So the first stage is carbon fixation. So in this stage, CO2 molecules enter the chloroplast and attach to a 5-carbon sugar called RUBP. Again, I'm going to go by acronyms here because it's just easier. So this reaction is then catalyzed by the enzyme RUBISCO, one of the most abundant proteins on Earth. Now, I don't talk about it much here, but it's definitely worth noting. So the product is a short-lived 6-carbon compound that immediately splits into 2 3-carbon molecules called 3-PGA. That brings us to the next step, the next stage, which is reduction. So ATP and NADPH from the light reactions provide energy and electrons to convert 3-PGA into G3P, a 3-carbon sugar phosphate. The conversion requires the donation of electrons from NADPH and a phosphate group from ATP. One molecule of G3P eventually contributes to the formation of organic carbohydrates. However, not all G3P molecules leave the cycle. Some remain to help regenerate the starting molecule RUBP in the next stage. So stage 3, the regeneration of RUBP. So to keep the cycle operating, most of the G3P molecules are rearranged into RUBP using energy from ATP. This allows the cycle to continue capturing CO2. So now we bring ourselves to how these phases are connected. So although separate, the light-dependent reactions and the Kelvin-Benson cycle, or the light-independent reactions, are dependent on one another. The Kelvin cycle requires ATP and NADPH from the light reaction side to synthesize sugar, whereas the light reactions require ADP and NADP positive, which are the used forms of these, returned from the Kelvin cycle, then to be re-energized. Therefore, there is a transfer of energy between molecules, between the 2 parts that keep the photosynthesis going. So, in conclusion, photosynthesis is a complex multi-step process that enables plants and other organisms to capture light energy and convert it into sugars. The light-dependent reactions harvest and convert solar energy into ATP and NADPH. The Kelvin cycle then uses those energy molecules to fix carbon dioxide into organic compounds such as glucose. Without photosynthesis, life as we know it wouldn't exist. So now, that's all I have for you today, but before I leave you, let's go over the 5 questions I started the presentation off with. These questions are, What is photosynthesis and why is it important for life on Earth? Which organisms are capable of carrying out photosynthesis? In which part of the plant cell does photosynthesis take place? What are the main raw materials needed for photosynthesis? And what are the main products formed during photosynthesis? The answer for question 1 is photosynthesis is the biological process that captures light energy from the sun and converts it into chemical energy stored in sugars. For question 2, the primary organisms capable of photosynthesis are plants, algae, and cyanobacteria. Question 3, photosynthesis occurs within specialized organelles called chloroplasts. Question 4, the reactants needed for photosynthesis are carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. Question 5, the main products formed during photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen gas. My name is Dustyn Taylor, and thank you for watching. Roll credits!